They said women couldn't handle the pressure of combat flying, couldn't make the split-second decisions that kept million-dollar aircraft from becoming twisted metal. Colonel Rebecca Viper Martinez had heard it all before, but she never expected to hear it from her own commanding officer as he handed her the retirement papers that would end her 22-year career in the cockpit, the fluorescent lights in general. Thomas Harrison's office cast harsh shadows across his weathered face as he delivered the news that would shatter Rebecca's world. At 43, she was being forced into early retirement, her fighter pilot days officially over. The reasoning was clinical, delivered with the kind of bureaucratic precision that the Air Force had perfected over decades of pushing inconvenient truths under administrative carpets. The modern battlefield requires adaptability, Martinez, Harrison said, his voice carrying the weight of institutional authority. Younger pilots, fresh perspectives, new approaches to aerial warfare. The F-35 Lightning program needs aviators who can grow with evolving technology, not those stuck in legacy thinking patterns. Rebecca's grip tightened on the leather armrest of her chair, her knuckles white against the tan material. Legacy thinking. The phrase hit like a missile to the chest. 22 years of flying missions over Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria. 3 air-to-air kills confirmed. More close air support missions than she could count, saving ground troops who would never know. Her name, instructor pilot ratings on 4 different aircraft types. Test pilot qualifications that had put her in the cockpit of experimental fighters that pushed the boundaries of physics and human endurance. All of it reduced to legacy thinking by a general who had spent more time behind a desk than in a cockpit. During the past decade, the irony wasn't lost on her. Harrison's office walls were decorated with photographs of legendary male pilots from World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. Heroes whose legacy thinking had apparently been acceptable when it came wrapped in masculine credentials and wartime glory. Chuck Yeager's signed portrait hung directly behind Harrison's desk, the test pilot's knowing smile seeming to mock the hypocrisy of the moment. "General, with respect, my flight evaluations have been exemplary," Rebecca said, forcing her voice to remain steady despite the rage building in her chest. "My combat effectiveness ratings are in the top 5% of active fighter pilots. My students consistently outperform their peers in training exercises and operational deployments." Harrison's expression remained unchanged, the kind of practice neutrality that career officers develop when delivering unwelcome news. "Your technical skills have never been in question, Martinez. But the Air Force is evolving. We need pilots who can adapt to integrated warfare concepts, drone coordination, and network-centric operations. The future of air combat isn't about individual heroics or traditional dogfighting skills." The dismissal was wrapped in progressive language, but Rebecca recognized the underlying message. She was being pushed out not because of her capabilities, but because her continued presence challenged assumptions about who belonged in the cockpit of America's most advanced fighters. The Air Force had made progress in recent years, officially opening combat roles to women and promoting gender equality in military aviation. But institutional change moved slowly, and old attitudes died hard. Hey everyone, welcome to our channel. We're so excited to have you here with us today. If you're enjoying our content, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. It really helps us out. Share this video with your friends who might love it too. Your support means everything to us and keeps us motivated to create more amazing content for you. Thanks for being part of our awesome community. Now let's jump right into today's video. Rebecca had fought these battles before, starting with her first day at the Air Force Academy when upperclassmen told her that women lacked the physical strength and mental toughness for fighter aviation. She had proven them wrong by graduating third in her class and earning a pilot slot that dozens of male cadets had coveted. She had endured the whispers during flight training, the subtle suggestions that she was taking a spot that belonged to a man. The constant scrutiny that measured every mistake against her gender rather than her individual performance. The early years had been the hardest. Squadron mates who questioned whether she could handle the physical demands of high-G maneuvering. Commanders who assigned her to less challenging missions, ostensibly for her own protection, but effectively limiting her opportunities to prove herself in combat. Ground crews who treated her like a novelty rather than a combat pilot, their surprised reactions to her technical knowledge reflecting assumptions about women's mechanical aptitude. But Rebecca had persevered, driven by a combination of personal determination and genuine love for flying that transcended the politics of gender integration. She had studied harder than her peers, trained longer, and pushed herself to exceed every standard set before her. When the opportunity for combat deployment finally came, she had seized it with both hands, volunteering for the most dangerous missions, and proving that courage and skill had nothing to do with chromosomes. Her first air-to-air kill had come during a routine patrol over northern Iraq when 2 enemy fighters had attempted to intercept a humanitarian aid convoy. Rebecca had engaged both aircraft simultaneously, using tactics she had developed during countless hours of training to defeat numerically superior forces. The engagement lasted less than 3 minutes, but it had established her reputation as a pilot who could think and fight under pressure. The second kill came 18 months later during a complex air-to-ground mission that had gone sideways when enemy fighters appeared unexpectedly. Rebecca had been providing close air support to embattled ground troops when her radar warning receiver lit up with multiple threats. While coordinating with ground controllers and maintaining situational awareness of friendly forces, she had managed to defeat an enemy fighter attempting to disrupt the mission. The ground troops she had been protecting later credited her with saving their lives, but the official reports focused on the successful completion of the primary mission rather than her individual heroics. The third kill was the most challenging. A night intercept mission that required her to track and engage an enemy aircraft using only passive sensors to avoid detection. The technical complexity of the engagement, combined with the demanding flight conditions, had pushed her skills to their absolute limits. When she finally achieved weapons lock and fired the missile that ended the threat, she had felt a profound sense of professional satisfaction that transcended personal achievement. She had proven that American pilots, regardless of gender, could outfight any adversary in the world, but individual accomplishments, no matter how spectacular, couldn't overcome institutional inertia. Rebecca's career had progressed steadily. Through the ranks, each promotion hard-fought and thoroughly earned. She had commanded fighter squadrons, served as an instructor pilot at the Air Force's elite weapons school, and participated in joint training exercises with allied nations. Her expertise in air-to-air combat had made her a sought-after consultant for tactical development programs, and her insights had influenced training protocols used throughout the Air Force. Yet here she sat, listening to a general explain why her experience was no longer valuable to the service she had devoted her adult life to serving. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. The same Air Force that had benefited from her expertise, that had promoted her through the ranks and decorated her for combat performance, was now suggesting that her continued presence was somehow detrimental to operational readiness. "What about Captain Johnson?" Rebecca asked, referring to a male pilot in her squadron who was 3 years older and had significantly fewer flight hours. His last evaluation showed performance issues during air-to-air training exercises. His students consistently rank in the bottom third of their graduating classes. Harrison's expression tightened slightly, the first crack in his bureaucratic composure. "Captain Johnson's situation is different. He's been selected for advanced training on the F-35 Lightning program. His adaptability to new systems has been noted by his instructors." The explanation was transparently inadequate, but Rebecca understood the underlying dynamic. Johnson was being given opportunities to improve and grow, while she was being pushed toward the exit. The double standard was so blatant that it would have been laughable if it weren't destroying her career. Male pilots who showed performance issues received additional training and support. Female pilots who excelled were thanked for their service and shown the door. Rebecca's mind raced through the implications of forced retirement. Her pension would be adequate, and she had savings that would provide financial security. But flying wasn't just her career. It was her identity. The thought of never again feeling the sublime satisfaction of a perfect landing, never again experiencing the rush of aerial combat, never again pushing the boundaries of human and machine capability, was almost unbearable. The official retirement ceremony would be held next month, complete with speeches about her distinguished service and contributions to military aviation. The Air Force would present her with medals and commendations, acknowledging her achievements while simultaneously discarding her expertise. The hypocrisy was breathtaking, but it was also entirely predictable. Institutional change required sacrifices, and women who challenged traditional assumptions often found themselves bearing the cost of progress. As she left Harrison's office, Rebecca felt the weight of institutional dismissal settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. The corridors of Peterson Air Force Base, which had felt like home for the past 4 years, now seemed foreign and unwelcoming. Fellow officers who had previously treated her as an equal now seemed to be measuring her with different standards, their expressions reflecting the kind of professional pity reserved for careers that had ended prematurely. The worst part was the knowledge that her forced retirement would be interpreted as validation of the very prejudices she had spent her career fighting. Those who had always doubted women's place in combat aviation would point to her departure as evidence that female pilots couldn't sustain long-term careers in fighter squadrons. The narrative would be that she had been given every opportunity to succeed, but had ultimately fallen short of the standards required for continued service. Rebecca's hands shook as she drove home to her modest apartment near the base, anger and frustration warring with a deep sense of professional loss. She had given everything to the Air Force, sacrificing personal relationships and financial opportunities to serve her country in the most demanding role military aviation could offer. The betrayal she felt was personal, but it was also representative of a larger institutional failure to fully embrace the potential of all its members. That evening, she sat in her living room surrounded by the artifacts of a distinguished military career. Flight suits hanging in the closet, each one representing different aircraft she had mastered. Photographs of squadron mates, many of whom had moved on to civilian careers or staff positions. Awards and commendations that testified to her professional competence and personal courage. All of it would soon be relegated to memory, stored away like relics of a career that had ended too soon. The phone rang, interrupting her melancholy reflection. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but the voice on the other end was familiar. Colonel Sarah Chun, a fellow female pilot who had transitioned to intelligence work after her own flying career had been curtailed by similar institutional pressures. "Rebecca, I heard about your retirement," Sarah said, her voice carrying the sympathy of someone who had walked the same difficult path. "I'm sorry. I know how much flying meant to you." The conversation that followed would change everything, though Rebecca couldn't have known it at the time. Sarah's call wasn't just about offering support. It was about presenting an opportunity that would allow Rebecca to prove, once and for all, that gender had nothing to do with a pilot's ability to perform under pressure. But for now, Rebecca simply felt the crushing weight of institutional rejection, the bitter knowledge that her 22 years of service had been deemed insufficient by men who had never matched her achievements in the cockpit. The fighter jets she had loved, the missions she had flown, the students she had trained, all of it was being taken away by people who believed that women couldn't handle the pressure of combat flying. They were about to discover just how wrong they had been. Sarah's voice carried an unusual tension that Rebecca had never heard before, even during their most challenging deployments overseas. The two women had flown together in Iraq, where Sarah had demonstrated the kind of tactical brilliance that earned respect from even the most skeptical male pilots. Her transition to intelligence work had been voluntary, driven by a desire to influence military operations from a strategic perspective, rather than being pushed out like Rebecca was experiencing. "I need to see you in person," Sarah continued, her words carefully measured. "There's something I can't discuss over the phone. Can you meet me at the Riverside Diner on Highway 24 tomorrow morning? 8 o'clock sharp." Rebecca agreed, though curiosity gnawed at her throughout the sleepless night that followed. Sarah had always been direct and straightforward, but this conversation felt different. The secrecy suggested something beyond a simple career counseling session or emotional support meeting. Rebecca found herself wondering what kind of intelligence work Sarah was involved in, and why it might be relevant to a fighter pilot facing forced retirement. The Riverside Diner was a local institution, the kind of place where military personnel from nearby bases gathered for coffee and conversation away from the formal constraints of official meetings. Rebecca arrived early, claiming a corner booth that provided privacy while allowing her to observe the other customers. Old habits from combat deployments died hard, and situational awareness remained second nature even in civilian settings. Sarah arrived precisely on time, her professional demeanor intact despite the casual environment. She wore civilian clothes, but her posture and bearing still radiated the confidence of someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions under pressure. The intelligence world had been good to her, providing opportunities for advancement that combat aviation had ultimately denied. "You look like hell," Sarah observed, sliding into the booth across from Rebecca. "I know retirement wasn't your choice, but you need to understand that this might be the best thing that ever happened to your career." Rebecca's eyebrows rose at the unexpected statement. "Getting forced out of the cockpit is the best thing for my flying career? That's some interesting logic, Sarah." "Not your flying career," Sarah corrected, lowering her voice and leaning forward. "Your real career. The one you've been preparing for without knowing it. Rebecca, what I'm about to tell you is classified at levels that most generals don't have access to. I need your word that this conversation stays between us, regardless of what you decide." The seriousness in Sarah's tone eliminated any doubt that this was more than a friendly meeting. Rebecca nodded, her combat-trained mind already shifting into the analytical mode that had served her well during complex missions. Sarah's intelligence background had clearly exposed her to programs and operations that existed outside normal military channels. 3 months ago, our assets in Eastern Europe identified a new threat, Sarah began, her voice barely above a whisper. "A rogue state has acquired advanced surface-to-air missile systems from multiple sources. Russian S-400 batteries, Chinese HQ-9 systems, and some experimental technology that our analysts can't fully identify. They've created an integrated air defense network that's potentially impenetrable to conventional aircraft." Rebecca's tactical mind immediately began processing the implications. Integrated air defense systems represented the nightmare scenario for fighter pilots, combining multiple radar types and missile systems to create overlapping coverage that was nearly impossible to penetrate. The most advanced stealth aircraft in the American inventory would struggle against such comprehensive defenses. "Why are you telling me this?" Rebecca asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. "Because traditional approaches won't work," Sarah replied. "We've run computer simulations using every aircraft in our inventory, from the F-22 Raptor to the B-2 Spirit. Success probability is less than 15% for any conventional penetration mission. The enemy has studied our tactics, our aircraft capabilities, and our operational patterns. They've built their defenses specifically to counter American air power. The implications were staggering. American military dominance had been built on the ability to establish air superiority quickly and decisively. If hostile forces could create truly impenetrable air defenses, the strategic balance of power would shift dramatically. Ground forces would be vulnerable to air attack, naval operations would become exponentially more dangerous, and the projection of American power would be severely limited. So what's the solution? Rebecca asked, though she was beginning to understand why Sarah had sought her out. The solution requires a different approach entirely, Sarah explained. Not better technology, but better tactics. Not more advanced aircraft, but more skilled pilots. The kind of pilot who can think beyond standard operating procedures, who can adapt to unexpected situations, who can make split-second decisions based on experience rather than doctrine. Rebecca felt a familiar surge of adrenaline, the same sensation she had experienced before every combat mission. The challenge Sarah was describing was exactly the kind of problem that had drawn her to fighter aviation in the first place. Complex, dangerous, and requiring the absolute best from both pilot and aircraft. "You're talking about a suicide mission," Rebecca said flatly. "Even the most skilled pilot can't overcome physics. If the defenses are as comprehensive as you describe, no single aircraft is going to penetrate them successfully." Sarah's smile was enigmatic, carrying the confidence of someone who knew more than she was revealing. "That's where you're wrong. We've identified a vulnerability in their system, but exploiting it requires pilot skills that very few people possess. The mission window is extremely narrow. The flight profile is unlike anything in standard tactical doctrine, and the margin for error is essentially zero." The description sent chills down Rebecca's spine, but also sparked the kind of professional excitement that had driven her throughout her career. Impossible missions were what separated exceptional pilots from competent ones. The challenges that seemed insurmountable to others were often just complex problems waiting for the right combination of skill, experience, and determination. "What makes you think I'm the right person for this?" Rebecca asked, though she suspected. She already knew the answer. "Because you've been preparing for this mission your entire career without knowing it," Sarah replied. "Your air-to-air combat experience, your test pilot background, your instructor qualifications, your ability to think under pressure. Most importantly, your willingness to prove that conventional wisdom is wrong." The last point hit home with particular force. Rebecca's entire career had been about challenging assumptions and exceeding expectations. She had proven that women could handle the physical demands of high-performance aircraft, that they could make effective tactical decisions under combat stress, and that they could earn the respect of their peers through superior performance. This mission, whatever it entailed, would be the ultimate test of everything she had learned. "I haven't even heard the mission details, and you're already assuming I'll accept," Rebecca observed. "Because I know you," Sarah replied. "You've never backed down from a challenge in your life. You've never accepted limitations that others tried to impose on you. And you've never been satisfied with retirement when there's still flying to be done." The psychological assessment was uncomfortably accurate. Rebecca had indeed never been able to resist a challenge, especially one that others considered impossible. The prospect of proving her capabilities one more time, of demonstrating that experience and skill could overcome institutional prejudice, was almost irresistible. "Tell me about the mission," Rebecca said, her decision already made, though she hadn't yet admitted it to herself. Sarah glanced around the diner, ensuring their conversation remained private. "The target is a weapons facility in a mountainous region. Intelligence indicates they're developing chemical weapons that could be used against civilian populations. The facility is protected by the integrated air defense system I described, plus natural geographical barriers that limit approach routes." Rebecca's mind immediately began analyzing the tactical problem. Mountainous terrain created additional challenges for both aircraft and missiles, but it also provided opportunities for skilled pilots who understood how to use geography to their advantage. The key would be finding an approach route that minimized exposure to defensive systems while maintaining the element of surprise. "What aircraft would I be flying?" Rebecca asked. "Modified F-16 Fighting Falcon," Sarah replied. "Stripped of non-essential systems to reduce weight and radar signature. Enhanced electronic warfare suite to counter enemy sensors. External fuel tanks for extended range. And a few other modifications that I can't discuss until you're officially read into the program." The choice of aircraft was interesting and somewhat surprising. The F-16 was a proven platform, but it was also older technology compared to the stealth fighters that dominated modern air combat. The decision to use a modified version suggested that the mission required specific capabilities that newer aircraft couldn't provide. "Why not use an F-22 or F-35?" Rebecca asked. "The stealth characteristics would seem more appropriate for penetrating advanced air defenses. Stealth technology is effective against most radar systems, but the enemy has developed countermeasures specifically designed to detect our stealth aircraft," Sarah explained. "Their radar network uses multiple frequency bands and advanced processing algorithms that can identify even low observable targets. The F-16's smaller size and modified configuration actually provides better concealment than larger stealth aircraft." The explanation made tactical sense, though it also highlighted the mission's extreme difficulty. If stealth technology was ineffective, the pilot would need to rely on flying skills and tactical knowledge to avoid detection. The margin for error would be minimal, and any mistake would likely be fatal. "How long do I have to prepare?" Rebecca asked. 2 weeks, Sarah replied. "I know it's not much time, but the intelligence window is closing rapidly. The enemy is aware that their facility has been compromised, and they're accelerating their weapons development program. If we don't act soon, they'll have chemical weapons capable of killing thousands of people. 2 weeks to prepare for a mission that would require perfect execution under combat conditions." Rebecca had trained for complex operations before, but this timeline was compressed even by military standards. She would need to familiarize herself with the modified aircraft, study the target area, develop tactical approaches, and prepare mentally for what might be her final flight. "What about support?" Rebecca asked. "Electronic warfare aircraft, fighter escort, search and rescue assets?" "None," Sarah replied bluntly. "The mission requires complete operational security. Any supporting aircraft would compromise the element of surprise and alert the enemy to our intentions. You'll be flying alone, with no backup and no rescue if something goes wrong." The stark reality of the mission began to sink in. Rebecca would be flying solo into heavily defended airspace, in a modified aircraft she had never flown before, to attack a target that conventional wisdom considered impossible to reach. Success would require perfect execution of every aspect of the mission, from takeoff to weapons delivery to escape. Failure would mean death, and possibly the loss of critical intelligence about enemy capabilities. "I assume this mission doesn't officially exist," Rebecca said. "Correct," Sarah confirmed. "If you're captured or killed, the government will deny any knowledge of the operation. Your death will be explained as a training accident, and your family will never know the truth about what happened." The final piece of information was delivered with the clinical precision that intelligence officers used when discussing operational realities. Rebecca's sacrifice, if it came to that, would be anonymous and unacknowledged. Her family would receive a folded flag and condolences from officers who couldn't explain how or why she had died. Rebecca sat in silence for several minutes, processing the magnitude of what Sarah was proposing. The mission represented everything she had trained for. Throughout her career, but it also meant accepting the possibility that her last flight might end in failure and death. The irony wasn't lost on her that the Air Force, which had deemed her unsuitable for continued service, was now asking her to undertake a mission that no one else could complete. "When do we start?" Rebecca asked finally. Sarah's smile was genuine. For the first time during their conversation, "We start now. There's a car waiting outside that will take you to a classified facility where you'll begin immediate preparation. Your retirement ceremony has been postponed indefinitely, and your official status is now classified." As they stood to leave the diner, Rebecca felt the familiar surge of anticipation that preceded every challenging mission. The institutional rejection she had experienced was fading, replaced by the prospect of proving once again that skill and determination could overcome any obstacle. The men who had forced her into retirement believed that women couldn't handle the pressure of combat flying. They were about to discover just how catastrophically wrong they had been. The classified facility appeared unremarkable from the outside, resembling any number of corporate office buildings scattered throughout the Colorado Springs area. Rebecca followed Sarah through a series of security checkpoints that became progressively more sophisticated, each one requiring additional credentials and biometric verification. The casual atmosphere of their diner meeting had evaporated, replaced by the sterile professionalism of a black operations facility. Dr. Michael Rodriguez emerged from an elevator as they reached the third sublevel, his appearance immediately marking him as someone who lived at the intersection of academia and military operations. His graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses suggested a scholarly background, but his posture and direct gaze indicated someone comfortable with high-stakes decision-making under pressure. "Captain Martinez," he said, extending a firm handshake. "I'm the project director for Operation Nightfall. Sarah has briefed me on your background, and I have to say, your qualifications are exactly what we need for this mission." Rebecca noted the use of her rank rather than the civilian title she had expected as a retiree. The subtle indication that she remained on active duty, at least for operational purposes, was both reassuring and ominous. The military bureaucracy that had pushed her toward retirement was apparently flexible enough to recall her when her specific skills were needed. "Doctor, I appreciate the confidence, but I haven't even seen the aircraft yet," Rebecca replied. 2 weeks seems like an extremely compressed timeline for mission preparation, especially given the complexity Sarah described. Rodriguez's expression grew serious as he led them down a corridor lined with offices that hummed with quiet activity. "The timeline isn't ideal, but it's driven by intelligence indicators that we can't control. The enemy facility is nearing completion of their weapons program, and our window for effective intervention is closing rapidly." They entered a briefing room equipped with sophisticated display systems that could project everything from satellite imagery to three-dimensional tactical models. Rodriguez activated the screens, revealing photographs of a mountainous region that looked like something from a geography textbook rather than a target area for military operations. "The Cravonian Republic," Rodriguez began, using a name that Rebecca didn't recognize from current geopolitical discussions. "Officially, they're a neutral nation focused on economic development and regional stability. Unofficially, they've been acquiring advanced military technology from multiple sources and developing weapons capabilities that pose a direct threat to American interests." The satellite imagery showed a country that appeared deceptively peaceful, with cities nestled in valleys and transportation networks that suggested normal civilian activity. But Rebecca's trained eye identified details that told a different story. The road networks were too robust for a purely civilian economy. The power generation facilities were oversized for the apparent population, and certain industrial complexes had the distinctive characteristics of military installations. "The target facility is here," Rodriguez continued, highlighting a complex built into the side of a mountain approximately 50 miles from the capital city. Intelligence indicates it's a chemical weapons production site, specifically designed to manufacture agents that could be deployed against civilian populations in neighboring countries. Rebecca studied the facility's layout with growing concern. The installation was clearly designed with security in mind, built into natural rock formations that would provide protection against conventional bombing attacks. The surrounding terrain was mountainous and heavily forested, creating natural barriers that would limit approach routes for attacking aircraft. "What kind of chemical agents are we talking about?" Rebecca asked. "Nerve agents similar to those used in Syria, but with enhanced stability and dispersal characteristics," Rodriguez replied grimly. "Our analysts estimate that a single production run could generate enough material to kill tens of thousands of people. The facility is scheduled to begin full-scale production within 3 weeks." The moral implications of the mission crystallized in Rebecca's mind. This wasn't just about proving her capabilities as a pilot or challenging institutional prejudices. Lives were at stake, potentially massive numbers of civilian casualties, if the weapons facility became operational. The pressure to succeed was no longer personal. It was humanitarian. "Show me the defenses," Rebecca said, her voice taking on the professional tone she used when analyzing tactical problems. Rodriguez switched to a different display that showed the integrated air defense network Sarah had described. The visualization was sobering, revealing overlapping radar coverage and missile engagement zones that created a nearly impenetrable barrier around the target area. Rebecca had seen similar defensive configurations during her combat deployments, but never with this level of sophistication and coordination. "The enemy has studied American air combat tactics extensively," Rodriguez explained. "Their defensive network is specifically designed to counter our standard penetration methods. High-altitude approaches are covered by long-range surface-to-air missiles. Low-altitude routes are monitored by short-range systems that can engage fast-moving targets. Electronic warfare countermeasures are integrated throughout the system." Rebecca's mind began working through the tactical puzzle, analyzing angles of approach and potential vulnerabilities in the defensive network. The enemy had indeed created a formidable barrier, but her experience had taught her that no defensive system was perfect. Every network had weaknesses, gaps that could be exploited by pilots with sufficient skill and determination. "There has to be a vulnerability," Rebecca said, studying the display intently. "No defensive system can cover every possible approach route, especially in mountainous terrain." Rodriguez smiled, the expression of someone who had been waiting for exactly that observation. "You're absolutely right. We've identified a potential penetration route, but exploiting it requires flying skills that push the boundaries of human capability." The next display showed a 3-dimensional model of the target area, with topographical details that revealed the complexity of the terrain. Rebecca could see why conventional approaches would fail. The mountains created natural barriers that channeled attacking aircraft into predictable routes covered by defensive systems. "The vulnerability is here," Rodriguez indicated, highlighting a narrow valley that wound through the mountains toward the target facility. "It's below the minimum engagement altitude for long-range missiles, and the terrain masking would conceal an aircraft from most radar systems." Rebecca examined the proposed route with growing amazement and concern. The valley was incredibly narrow, requiring precision flying that would challenge even the most experienced pilots. The flight path twisted through mountain passes barely wide enough for a fighter aircraft, with vertical rock walls that would leave no room for evasive maneuvering. "You're talking about nap of the earth flying in terrain that would be challenging for a helicopter," Rebecca observed. "At fighter aircraft speeds, the margin for error would be essentially zero." "Exactly," Rodriguez confirmed. "Which is why we need a pilot with your specific combination of experience and skill. Your test pilot background gives you the precise aircraft control required for this kind of flying." Your combat experience provides the tactical judgment needed to adapt to unexpected situations, and your instructor qualifications demonstrate the kind of professional expertise that can't be taught in normal training programs. The psychological assessment was flattering, but also intimidating. Rebecca had indeed flown in challenging conditions throughout her career, but this mission would require sustained precision flying under combat stress. A single mistake, even a momentary lapse in concentration, would result in catastrophic failure. "What about the aircraft?" Rebecca asked. Sarah mentioned a modified F-16, but I need to understand the specific capabilities and limitations. Rodriguez led them to another section of the facility, where a single aircraft sat in a hangar that looked more like a research laboratory than a maintenance facility. The F-16 Fighting Falcon was immediately recognizable, but Rebecca could see modifications that transformed it into something quite different from the standard production model. "We call her the Wraith," Rodriguez said with obvious pride. "Based on a Block 50 F-16, but extensively modified for this specific mission profile." Rebecca walked around the aircraft, her experienced eye cataloging the changes that had been made. The external fuel tanks were larger than standard, indicating extended range capability. The radar warning receiver antennas were different, suggesting enhanced electronic warfare systems. Most significantly, the aircraft's paint scheme was unlike anything she had seen before, a matte finish that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "The modifications are extensive," Rodriguez explained. "Enhanced electronic warfare suite to counter enemy radar systems. Improved inertial navigation system for precision flying in terrain that blocks GPS signals. Modified engine for reduced infrared signature. And a few other improvements that I can't discuss until you're officially read into the program." Rebecca climbed the ladder to examine the cockpit, finding an instrument panel that was familiar yet distinctly different from standard F-16 configurations. Additional displays showed information she didn't recognize, and several switches and controls had been added to accommodate the aircraft's enhanced capabilities. "How much time do I have to familiarize myself with these systems?" Rebecca asked. 10 days of intensive training," Rodriguez replied. "Simulator work, ground school, and actual flight time. It's compressed compared to normal conversion training. But we've designed a program that focuses specifically on the skills you'll need for this mission." 10 days to master an aircraft that represented years of development and modification. Rebecca had transitioned between different fighter types before, but always with months of preparation and gradually increasing complexity. This timeline would require her to absorb information and develop skills at a rate that pushed the limits of human learning capacity. "What about mission planning?" Rebecca asked. "Route selection, timing, weather considerations, backup plans?" "We've developed a preliminary mission profile, but the final details will be determined based on your input," Rodriguez replied. "You're the pilot who will be flying this mission, so your tactical judgment will be the deciding factor in how we approach the target." The statement was both empowering and sobering. Rebecca would have significant input into mission planning, but she would also bear ultimate responsibility for the tactical decisions that would determine success or failure. The weight of that responsibility was familiar from her combat experience, but the stakes had never been higher. "I need to understand the rules of engagement," Rebecca said. "What happens if I encounter unexpected opposition? What if the mission goes wrong and I'm forced to abort?" Rodriguez's expression grew somber. "The rules of engagement are simple. Complete the mission by any means necessary. If you encounter opposition, you're authorized to defend yourself and continue toward the target. If technical problems force you to abort, you're to return to base and will develop alternative approaches." The answer was straightforward but incomplete. Rebecca understood that certain aspects of the mission would remain classified until she was deeper into the preparation process. The need-to-know principle that governed special operations meant that she would learn mission details gradually, as her training progressed and her commitment to the operation solidified. "And if I'm shot down?" Rebecca asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Then you were never here," Rodriguez replied simply. "This conversation never happened. This facility doesn't exist, and your death will be explained as a training accident during routine flight operations." The finality of that statement hung in the air between them. Rebecca had accepted similar risks throughout her combat career, but they had always been shared with squadron mates who understood the dangers they faced together. This mission would be flown alone, with no backup and no rescue if things went wrong. "I need to call my family," Rebecca said finally. "They'll expect to hear from me, and my sudden disappearance would raise questions." "Already handled," Rodriguez assured her. "Your family has been told that you've been selected for a classified training program that will require minimal contact for the next few weeks. They've been asked to respect the security requirements and avoid discussing your activities with anyone outside the immediate family." "Hey everyone. Welcome to our channel. We're so excited to have you here with us today. If you're enjoying our content, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. It really helps us out. Share this video with your friends who might love it too. Your support means everything to us and keeps us motivated to create more amazing content for you. Thanks for being part of our awesome community. Now let's jump right into today's video. The efficiency with which her personal life had been managed was both impressive and unsettling. The organization behind Operation Nightfall had clearly planned for every contingency, including the need to maintain her cover story with family members who didn't have security clearances. "When do we start training?" Rebecca asked. "Now," Rodriguez replied, gesturing toward a door that led deeper into the facility. "Your first simulator session begins in 30 minutes. We'll start with basic aircraft familiarization and progress to mission-specific scenarios over the next 10 days. As they walked toward the training area, Rebecca felt the familiar surge of anticipation that preceded every new challenge in her career. The institutional rejection she had experienced was fading, replaced by the prospect of undertaking a mission that would test every skill she had developed over more than 2 decades of military flying. The men who had forced her into retirement believed that women couldn't handle the pressure of combat flying, that they lacked the physical and mental capabilities required for sustained operations under stress. The mission she was about to undertake would provide the ultimate test of those assumptions. Rebecca Martinez was about to prove them wrong in the most decisive way possible. The simulator bay hummed with the quiet efficiency of advanced technology. Banks of computers processing flight dynamics that would have been impossible to replicate just a decade earlier. Rebecca settled into the cockpit mock-up, her hands finding familiar positions on controls that had been modified for the Wraith's unique capabilities. The seat adjusted automatically to her body dimensions, and the helmet she donned connected to systems that would monitor everything from her heart rate to her eye movements during the training sessions. Chief Master Sergeant Patricia Williams supervised the simulator operations with the kind of professional competence that Rebecca had learned to associate with the Air Force's most experienced non-commissioned officers. Williams had spent 26 years maintaining and operating flight training systems, and her expertise would be crucial for compressing months of normal training into the 10-day window they had available. "Ma'am, we're going to start with basic aircraft handling," Williams explained, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had trained hundreds of pilots over the years. "The Wraith handles differently from a standard F-16, especially at low speeds and high angles of attack. The modifications change the aircraft's center of gravity and aerodynamic characteristics in ways that can surprise even experienced pilots." Rebecca acknowledged the briefing and initiated the startup sequence, her muscle memory guiding her through procedures that had become second nature over thousands of flight hours. But the Wraith's systems responded differently than she expected. The engines spooling up more quietly and the flight controls feeling subtly different in her hands. The first simulated flight revealed the extent of the challenge she faced. Aircraft's modified aerodynamics created handling characteristics that were familiar yet distinctly different from any F-16 she had flown before. During high-G maneuvers, the Wraith exhibited a tendency to roll unexpectedly, requiring constant corrections that would have been unnecessary in a standard aircraft. At low speeds, the modified wing configuration created unusual stall characteristics that could catch an unwary pilot off guard. "The learning curve is steeper than I expected," Rebecca admitted after the first session. Her flight suit damp with perspiration from the concentration required to maintain control during challenging maneuvers. Williams nodded understanding. Every pilot who's flown the Wraith has said the same thing. The modifications improve certain performance characteristics, but they also create new challenges that require adaptation. The good news is that pilots with your experience typically master the differences within a few days. Rebecca hoped Williams was right, because the mission timeline didn't allow for extended familiarization periods. Every day of training brought her closer to the moment when she would have to perform these maneuvers under combat conditions, with no room for error and no opportunity for practice runs. The second day introduced electronic warfare systems that were unlike anything Rebecca had encountered in her previous aircraft. The Wraith's defensive suite could identify and counter enemy radar systems automatically, but it also required pilot input to optimize performance against specific threats. The complexity was staggering, with multiple subsystems that needed to be coordinated while maintaining aircraft control and navigation accuracy. "The electronic warfare systems are the key to mission success," explained Captain James Harrison, a young officer who specialized in radar and communications technology. "The enemy's defensive network is sophisticated, but our systems can exploit weaknesses in their coverage patterns. The challenge is using the technology effectively while flying the demanding mission profile." Rebecca spent hours learning to interpret the displays that showed enemy radar coverage, threat priorities, and optimal countermeasure deployment. The information was presented in formats that required rapid analysis and decision-making skills that would be critical when flying through defended airspace at high speed and low altitude. By the third day, Rebecca was beginning to feel comfortable with the Wraith's handling characteristics, but the mission-specific training revealed new levels of complexity. The route through the mountain valley would require precision flying that pushed the boundaries of human capability, with vertical rock walls that left no room for course corrections or evasive maneuvers. "The terrain following radar will help with navigation, but you'll need to rely primarily on visual references," Williams explained during a briefing on low-level flight procedures. "The valley walls will block most electronic navigation signals, and the enemy's defensive systems include jammers that can disrupt GPS and inertial navigation systems." Rebecca practiced the valley approach repeatedly, memorizing every twist and turn of the route that would carry her to the target facility. The simulated terrain was based on satellite imagery and intelligence reports, but she knew that the actual flight would present challenges that no simulation could fully replicate. Weather conditions, visibility, and equipment malfunctions could all affect the mission in ways that were impossible to predict. The fourth day brought weapons training that focused on the specific ordnance the Wraith would carry for the mission. The aircraft had been configured to carry precision-guided munitions designed to penetrate hardened targets, but the weapon systems had been modified to integrate with the aircraft's enhanced electronic warfare capabilities. "The target facility is built into solid rock, which means you'll need to place the weapons with extreme precision," explained Major Lisa Chun, an ordnance specialist who had helped design the mission loadout. "The penetrating warheads can defeat the physical barriers, but only if they impact at the correct angle and velocity." Rebecca studied the target layout and weapon delivery parameters, calculating approach angles and release points that would maximize the probability of successful target destruction. The mathematics were complex, but her test pilot background provided the analytical skills needed to understand the relationships between aircraft performance, weapon characteristics, and target vulnerabilities. The fifth day introduced the most challenging aspect of the mission: night flying in mountainous terrain using only passive sensors to avoid detection. The Wraith would approach the target in complete darkness, relying on enhanced vision systems and terrain-following radar to navigate through the valley approach route. Night operations change everything, Williams emphasized during the briefing. Your depth perception is compromised, spatial orientation becomes more difficult, and the margin for error decreases significantly. The enhanced vision systems help, but they can't replace the kind of situational awareness that comes from experience. Rebecca practiced night approaches until the procedures became automatic, her hands finding controls without conscious thought while her eyes interpreted the green-tinted imagery from the night vision systems. The training was exhausting, requiring sustained concentration that left her mentally drained at the end of each session. By the sixth day, Rebecca was beginning to integrate all the mission elements into a cohesive operational plan. The individual skills she had been developing: aircraft handling, electronic warfare, navigation, and weapons delivery needed to work together seamlessly during the actual mission. The complexity was staggering, but she was beginning to feel confident that success was possible. "Your progress has been exceptional," Rodriguez observed during a mission planning session. "Most pilots require weeks to achieve the level of proficiency. You've demonstrated in less than a week. Your background has prepared you for exactly this kind of challenge." Rebecca appreciated the encouragement, but she also understood that training success didn't guarantee mission success. The controlled environment of the simulator was different from the chaos and uncertainty of actual combat operations. Equipment failures, weather changes, and enemy countermeasures could all affect the mission in ways that were impossible to replicate in training. The seventh day brought the first full mission simulation, combining all the elements Rebecca had been practicing into a complete operational scenario. The simulated flight would test her ability to navigate through the valley approach, defeat enemy defensive systems, deliver weapons accurately against the target, and escape through hostile airspace. The mission began before dawn, with Rebecca strapping into the simulator cockpit in complete darkness. The startup procedures were performed by touch, her hands finding switches and controls through muscle memory developed during hundreds of hours of training. The takeoff was routine, but the flight profile quickly became demanding as she began the low-level approach toward enemy territory. The terrain-following radar painted a picture of mountainous landscape that rushed past at terrifying speed. The aircraft's automated systems working constantly to maintain safe separation from the ground. Rebecca's hands moved continuously on the flight controls, making small corrections that kept the Wraith on course while avoiding terrain features that could cause catastrophic impact. The first enemy radar contact appeared on her threat display as she approached the outer edge of the defensive network. The Wraith's electronic warfare systems activated automatically, analyzing the radar signature and deploying countermeasures designed to minimize the aircraft's visibility. Rebecca watched the threat indicators, ready to take manual control if the automated systems failed to maintain concealment. The valley approach was even more challenging than she had expected, with rock walls that seemed to close in around the aircraft as she followed the twisting route toward the target. The night vision systems provided adequate visibility, but she found herself flying primarily by instrument reference, trusting the terrain-following radar to guide her through passages barely wide enough for the Wraith's wingspan. Halfway through the valley, her threat warning system activated with the distinctive tone that indicated missile launch. Rebecca's training took over, deploying chaff and flares while executing violent evasive maneuvers within the confines of the narrow passage. The simulated missile missed by margins that would have been terrifying in actual combat, but the Wraith emerged from the encounter still on course toward the target. The weapon's delivery phase required absolute precision, with Rebecca calculating approach angles and release points, while maintaining the high-speed, low-altitude profile that kept her below enemy radar coverage. The targeting system locked onto the facility's most vulnerable point, and she squeezed the trigger that would release the penetrating warheads in actual combat. The simulated weapons impacted with satisfying accuracy, the display showing successful destruction of the target facility. But the mission was only half complete. Rebecca still needed to escape through hostile airspace that would be fully alert after the attack. The egress route was different from the approach, requiring her to climb rapidly while deploying every electronic countermeasure available to avoid the missiles that would be launched in response to the successful strike. The simulation ended, with the Wraith crossing into friendly airspace, mission complete, and aircraft intact. Rebecca's heart was pounding from the sustained stress of the simulated combat, but she felt a profound sense of satisfaction at having successfully completed the complex mission profile. "Outstanding performance," Rodriguez said as she climbed out of the simulator. "You've demonstrated that this mission is not only possible but probable with the right pilot and the right preparation." Rebecca nodded, but she also understood that the real test was still to come. The simulation had been comprehensive, but actual combat would present challenges that no training program could fully replicate. Equipment failures, weather changes, and enemy responses that differed from intelligence predictions could all affect the mission in ways that would require real-time adaptation. The remaining 3 days of training focused on contingency procedures and emergency responses, preparing Rebecca for the unexpected situations that could arise during actual combat operations. She practiced dealing with equipment failures, navigating in degraded weather conditions, and adapting to enemy countermeasures that might neutralize her technological advantages. "The key to mission success is adaptability," Williams emphasized during the final briefing. "No plan survives contact with the enemy, and your ability to improvise and overcome unexpected challenges will be more important than perfect execution of planned procedures." Rebecca understood the wisdom in that advice, drawn from Williams' extensive experience training combat pilots. Flexibility and quick thinking had been crucial elements of her own combat success, and they would be even more important during a solo mission, where no backup would be available if things went wrong. As the training period concluded, Rebecca felt as prepared as possible for the challenges ahead. The Wraith's modified systems had become familiar, the mission route was memorized in detail, and her confidence in the aircraft's capabilities had grown with each successful simulator session. But she also understood that the real test would come when she climbed into the actual aircraft for a mission that would either validate her capabilities or end her career permanently. The institutional rejection she had experienced seemed like a distant memory now, replaced by the prospect of undertaking the mission that would prove definitively that skill and experience transcended gender-based assumptions about combat effectiveness. The men who had forced her toward retirement were about to discover that they had discarded exactly the kind of pilot their country needed most. The secure airfield materialized out of the Nevada desert like a mirage, its existence known only to a select few within the intelligence community. Rebecca arrived at the facility 3 hours before dawn, her body still adjusting to the sleep schedule that had been carefully manipulated to ensure peak performance during the mission window. The darkness was absolute, broken only by the minimal lighting required for safe aircraft operations. Dr. Rodriguez waited beside the hangar where the Wraith sat in final preparation, his usually calm demeanor betraying signs of the stress that accompanied high-stakes operations. The aircraft looked different under the harsh fluorescent lights, its matte finish seeming to absorb illumination rather than reflect it. Ground crews moved around the fighter with practiced efficiency, conducting final systems checks and loading the specialized ordnance that would be crucial for mission success. Weather conditions over the target area are optimal, Rodriguez reported, his voice carrying the clipped precision of someone who had spent the night monitoring intelligence. Updates. Cloud cover is minimal, winds are within acceptable parameters, and visibility is forecast to remain clear throughout the mission window. Rebecca nodded, though she understood that weather forecasts in mountainous terrain were notoriously unreliable. Conditions could change rapidly, and the narrow valley she would be flying through could create local weather patterns that differed significantly from regional predictions. Her training had emphasized the importance of visual navigation, but poor visibility could make the terrain-following portion of the mission exponentially more dangerous. Chief Master Sergeant Williams approached with the pre-flight briefing materials, her expression reflecting the gravity of the moment. "Ma'am, we've completed all systems checks and the aircraft is ready for mission tasking. The electronic warfare suite is fully operational, weapon systems are armed and tested, and the navigation systems are programmed with the latest intelligence updates." Rebecca accepted the briefing folder, noting the red classification markings that indicated information so sensitive that unauthorized disclosure would constitute treason. The final mission parameters had been updated based on intelligence received during the previous 24 hours, including changes to enemy defensive positions and refined target identification data. "The enemy has increased patrol activity around the facility," Williams continued, her voice carrying the professional concern of someone who had seen too many missions go wrong due to unexpected complications. "Intelligence indicates they may be aware that their security has been compromised, though they don't appear to know the specific nature of the threat." Rebecca studied the updated intelligence reports, noting the positions of mobile radar units and surface-to-air missile batteries that had been repositioned since her last training update. The enemy's defensive network remained formidable, but the changes were predictable responses to perceived vulnerabilities rather than indications of specific knowledge about the impending attack. "How reliable is this intelligence?" Rebecca asked, though she suspected the answer would be less than completely reassuring. "Moderately reliable," Rodriguez replied with the honesty that Rebecca had learned to appreciate from the project team. "Our sources are well placed but not infallible. The enemy has sophisticated counterintelligence capabilities, and they've been working to identify and eliminate security leaks." Rebecca understood the implications. The intelligence that formed the foundation of her mission planning could be compromised or outdated, requiring her to adapt to situations that differed from her training scenarios. The ability to improvise and overcome unexpected challenges would be as important as technical flying skills. The final medical check was conducted by Dr. Angela Martinez, a flight surgeon who specialized in the physiological demands of high-performance aircraft operations. The examination was thorough but routine, confirming that Rebecca's physical condition was optimal for the demanding mission profile. "Your stress indicators are within normal parameters," Dr. Martinez reported after reviewing the test results. "Heart rate, blood pressure, and neurological responses all indicate that you're prepared for the physical demands of this mission. The psychological profile shows the kind of focused determination that we've seen in our most successful pilots." Rebecca appreciated the medical assessment, though she was more concerned about the aircraft's condition than her own. The Wraith represented experimental technology pushed to its operational limits, and equipment failures during the mission could be catastrophic. The modified systems had performed flawlessly during training, but combat operations would stress every component in ways that were impossible to fully replicate in peacetime conditions. The weapons loading process was conducted with the kind of precision that Rebecca had learned to associate with special operations. Each penetrating warhead was carefully installed and tested, the arming sequences verified through multiple redundant systems. The ordnance represented the culmination of years of development, designed specifically to defeat the hardened construction of the target facility. The weapons are configured for maximum penetration, explained Major Chen, the ordnance specialist who had overseen the loading process. The warheads will punch through 30 feet of reinforced concrete before detonating. The timing is crucial. You'll need to place them with extreme precision to ensure complete destruction of the chemical weapons production capability. Rebecca studied the weapons delivery parameters one final time, memorizing the approach angles and release points that would maximize the probability of successful target destruction. The mathematics were complex, but her test pilot background provided the analytical skills needed to understand the relationships between aircraft performance, weapon characteristics, and target vulnerabilities. The pre-flight inspection was conducted with unusual thoroughness, Rebecca's experienced hands checking every system and component that could affect mission success. The Wraith's modified configuration created unique maintenance requirements, and she wanted to personally verify that every aspect of the aircraft was functioning within normal parameters. The electronic warfare systems were particularly complex, with multiple subsystems that needed to operate in perfect coordination to defeat enemy radar networks. Rebecca tested each component individually, then verified the integrated performance that would be crucial for penetrating the sophisticated defensive systems protecting the target facility. The systems are performing at optimal levels, reported Technical Sergeant Robert Kim, the specialist responsible for the Wraith's electronic warfare suite. We've programmed the countermeasures based on the latest intelligence about enemy radar capabilities, but the final decisions about deployment will be yours during the mission. Rebecca understood the responsibility that came with operating such advanced technology. The automated systems would provide recommendations and default responses, but her tactical judgment would be the deciding factor in how the electronic warfare capabilities were employed against specific threats. The mission briefing was conducted in a secure conference room adjacent to the hangar, with the key personnel who had been involved in operation planning and preparation. The atmosphere was professional but tense, everyone understanding that the next few hours would determine whether months of preparation had been successful. The launch window opens in 90 minutes, Rodriguez announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had managed complex operations throughout his career. Current intelligence shows no changes to enemy defensive positions, and weather conditions remain favorable for the mission profile. Rebecca reviewed the mission timeline one final time, noting the critical decision points where she would need to make tactical choices based on real-time conditions. The flight plan was detailed but flexible, allowing for adaptations based on unexpected situations that might arise during the mission. Rules of engagement remain unchanged, Rodriguez continued. You are authorized to defend yourself against any threats, but the primary objective is mission completion. The intelligence value of destroying the chemical weapons facility outweighs all other considerations. Rebecca understood the prioritization, though she also recognized that her survival was important for operational security reasons. Her capture would compromise not only the mission but also the advanced technology represented by the Wraith. The aircraft's self-destruct systems would prevent the enemy from acquiring classified capabilities, but her knowledge of American special operations procedures could be equally valuable to hostile intelligence services. The final equipment check was conducted with the kind of attention to detail that Rebecca had learned to associate with life or death situations. Her flight suit was equipped with survival gear designed for operations in hostile territory, including emergency communications equipment and medical supplies that could sustain her if she was forced to evade capture. The survival equipment is configured for the specific terrain and climate conditions you'll encounter, explained Master Sergeant Williams. The emergency beacon will automatically activate if you're forced to eject, but remember that any transmission could be intercepted by enemy forces. Rebecca nodded, understanding that survival in enemy territory would require the same kind of tactical thinking that had made her successful as a combat pilot. The equipment provided capabilities, but her experience and judgment would determine how effectively those capabilities were employed. The psychological preparation was perhaps the most challenging aspect of the pre-mission routine. Rebecca had flown dangerous missions throughout her career, but never alone and never with stakes. This high, the isolation of solo operations created unique stresses that even experienced pilots found difficult to manage. Remember that you've trained for every aspect of this mission, Rodriguez reminded her during the final psychological briefing. Your preparation has been thorough, your skills are proven, and your aircraft is the most advanced ever built. Success is not only possible but probable with the right execution. Rebecca appreciated the encouragement, though she also understood that confidence needed to be balanced with realistic assessment of the challenges ahead. The mission would test every skill she had developed over more than 2 decades of military flying, and overconfidence could be as dangerous as excessive caution. The final communications check verified that all systems were functioning properly, and that the secure channels would be available for emergency use if needed. The communication protocols were designed to minimize the risk of interception while providing the capability for tactical coordination if circumstances required external support. Primary communication will be through encrypted data burst transmissions, explained Captain Harrison, the communications specialist who had designed the mission's information systems. Voice communications are available for emergencies, but remember that any transmission could be monitored by enemy intelligence services. Rebecca understood the communication restrictions, though she hoped that the mission would proceed smoothly. Enough that external coordination would be unnecessary. The most successful special operations were those that achieved their objectives without requiring support from outside agencies. The final weather update confirmed that conditions remained favorable for the mission, with clear skies and minimal wind that would not affect the precision flying required for the valley approach. The forecast showed no significant changes expected during the mission window, though Rebecca knew that mountain weather could be unpredictable. Visibility is forecast to remain excellent throughout the mission timeline, reported the meteorologist, who had been monitoring conditions over the target area. Cloud cover is minimal, and there are no weather systems that could affect aircraft performance or navigation accuracy. Rebecca felt a mixture of anticipation and anxiety as the final preparations were completed. The months of planning and weeks of training had led to this moment, when theoretical preparation would be tested against the reality of combat operations. Her career had been built on successfully managing such transitions, but the stakes had never been higher. The institutional rejection she had experienced seemed like a distant memory now, replaced by the immediate challenge of proving that her skills and experience were exactly what the mission required. The men who had forced her toward retirement were about to discover that their assumptions about gender and combat effectiveness had been catastrophically wrong. As Rebecca walked toward the Wraith for the final time, she felt the familiar surge of determination that had driven her throughout her career. The aircraft waited in the pre-dawn darkness, its modified systems ready to carry her into the most challenging mission of her military service. The moment of truth was at hand, and Rebecca Martinez was ready to prove that women could handle anything, that combat aviation could demand. The Wraith's engines spooled up with a whisper rather than the familiar roar Rebecca had grown accustomed to over thousands of flight hours. The modified propulsion system was eerily quiet, designed to minimize acoustic signature that could alert enemy forces to the aircraft's presence. As she completed the final systems checks, Rebecca felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that preceded every combat mission, her body and mind shifting into the heightened state of awareness that had kept her alive through countless dangerous situations. The takeoff was smooth, the aircraft lifting off the desert runway with an almost supernatural grace that spoke to the advanced Aerodynamics of its modified configuration. Rebecca climbed to cruise altitude, the stars brilliant in the pre-dawn sky as she set course for the target area. The flight management system displayed a route that would take her through international airspace before beginning the final approach through the mountain valley. 2 hours into the flight, Rebecca established her first waypoint and began the descent toward the terrain that would provide cover for the final approach. The landscape below was rugged and unforgiving, with mountain peaks that rose like stone teeth against the star-filled sky. The terrain following radar painted a picture of the topography ahead, showing the narrow valley that would serve as her avenue of approach to the target facility. The first indication of enemy activity came as she approached the outer edge of the defensive network. Her threat warning system detected long-range surveillance radar, the distinctive signature of Russian-made systems that had been modified for integration with the enemy's defensive network. Rebecca activated the Wraith's electronic warfare systems, watching as the automated countermeasures began their complex dance of deception and concealment. The radar contacts appeared and disappeared on her threat display as the electronic warfare suite worked to minimize her visibility while maintaining the aircraft's ability to navigate effectively. The technology was performing exactly as designed, but Rebecca remained alert for any indication that the enemy systems were adapting to her countermeasures. Modern air defense networks were sophisticated, enough to recognize and counter many electronic warfare techniques. As she approached the valley entrance, Rebecca reduced altitude to barely 50 feet above the ground, the aircraft's radar altimeter providing continuous feedback about her separation from the terrain rushing past below. The valley walls closed in around her, creating a corridor barely wide enough for the Wraith's wingspan. The precision required for this phase of the mission was extraordinary, demanding constant attention to aircraft position and attitude. The night vision systems transformed the darkness into a green-tinted world of rock and shadow, the enhanced imagery providing enough detail for safe navigation through the twisting passage. Rebecca's hands moved continuously on the flight controls, making small corrections that kept the aircraft centered in the narrow valley, while maintaining the high speed necessary for mission success. Halfway through the valley approach, her threat warning system activated with a distinctive tone that indicated surface-to-air missile launch. Rebecca's training took over instantly, deploying chaff and flares while executing violent evasive maneuvers within the confines of the narrow passage. The missile streaked past her position, its warhead detonating harmlessly against the valley wall after being confused by the countermeasures. The attack confirmed that the enemy was aware of her presence, though their response suggested they didn't know her exact location or intended target. Rebecca continued through the valley, knowing that additional missiles would be launched as the defensive network attempted to track and engage her aircraft. The element of surprise was partially lost, but the mission could still succeed if she maintained her course and timing. The second missile launch came from a different direction, indicating that the enemy had mobile launchers positioned throughout the defensive network. Rebecca deployed additional countermeasures while maintaining her heading toward the target, the aircraft's electronic warfare systems working at maximum capacity to defeat the incoming threats. The missile passed close enough that she could see its exhaust plume through the night vision display, but the warhead failed to detonate. As she approached the target facility, Rebecca could see the installation built into the mountainside, its entrance concealed by natural rock formations that would provide protection against conventional bombing attacks. The intelligence photographs had been accurate, but seeing the target in person revealed details that would affect her weapons delivery approach. The facility's defensive systems were more extensive than the vehicle intelligence reports had indicated, with additional radar installations and missile launchers positioned around the perimeter. Rebecca adjusted her attack profile to account for the enhanced defenses, calculating new approach angles that would maximize her chances of successful weapons Delivery while minimizing exposure to enemy fire. The weapon's delivery phase required absolute precision, with Rebecca lining up the targeting system while maintaining the high-speed, low-altitude profile that kept her below the most dangerous radar coverage. The facility's entrance was smaller than expected, requiring her to place the penetrating warheads with extreme accuracy to ensure they would reach the underground production areas. Rebecca squeezed the trigger at the precise moment indicated by the weapons computer, feeling the aircraft lurch slightly as the heavy ordnance separated from the external pylons. The penetrating warheads streaked toward the target, their trajectories carefully calculated to achieve maximum penetration before detonation. She didn't wait to observe the impact, immediately beginning the violent evasive maneuvers that would carry her away from the target area. The explosions came as she was pulling out of the attack dive, the detonations deep underground creating secondary effects that she could feel through the aircraft structure. The weapons had achieved their intended effect, destroying the chemical weapons production capability in a series of controlled explosions that would render the facility permanently inoperable. But the mission was only half complete. Rebecca still needed to escape through hostile airspace that was now fully alert to her presence. The valley route she had used for the approach was no longer viable, as enemy forces would be concentrating their defensive efforts in that area. She needed to find an alternative escape route that would take her away from the target area without exposing her to the concentrated defensive fire. The egress route she had planned during mission preparation took her through a different mountain pass, one that was wider but more exposed to enemy radar systems. Rebecca climbed rapidly while deploying every electronic countermeasure available, the aircraft systems working at maximum capacity to avoid the missiles that were being launched from multiple directions. The first surface-to-air missile to achieve radar lock came from a position she hadn't expected, indicating that the enemy had mobile launchers that could be repositioned rapidly in response to changing tactical situations. Rebecca executed a diving turn that brought her dangerously close to the mountain peaks, using the terrain to break the missile's guidance system while maintaining her heading toward friendly airspace. The electronic warfare systems were performing magnificently, creating false targets and radar signatures that confused the enemy's targeting systems. But Rebecca could see multiple missile launches on her threat display, more than her countermeasures could handle simultaneously. She would need to rely on flying skills and tactical maneuvering to avoid the remaining threats. The second mountain pass was more challenging than the approach valley, with crosswinds that buffeted the aircraft and reduced her control precision. Rebecca fought to maintain course while avoiding the missiles that continued to streak through the air around her position. One warhead detonated close enough to send shrapnel against the aircraft's armored surfaces, but the Wraith's construction absorbed the impact without critical damage. As she cleared the mountain peaks and began the final sprint toward friendly airspace, Rebecca felt the satisfaction of a mission successfully completed. The chemical weapons facility had been destroyed, eliminating a threat that could have killed thousands of innocent people. The Wraith had performed flawlessly, its advanced systems enabling her to penetrate defenses that would have been impenetrable to conventional aircraft. The flight back to the secure airfield was routine by comparison, though Rebecca remained alert for any indication that enemy aircraft might be pursuing her. Her fuel reserves were adequate for the return journey, and the aircraft systems showed no damage from the defensive fire she had encountered. The mission had been a complete success, achieved with the kind of precision and professionalism that had defined her career. As she approached the landing pattern at the secure facility, Rebecca felt a profound sense of accomplishment that transcended personal achievement. She had proven that skill and experience could overcome any obstacle, that the assumptions about gender and combat effectiveness were not only wrong, but dangerously counterproductive. The men who had forced her toward retirement had discarded exactly the kind of pilot their country needed most. The landing was smooth, the aircraft touching down with the gentle precision that marked the end of a successful mission. Ground crews rushed to secure the Wraith while Rebecca completed the shutdown procedures, her hands moving automatically through the familiar sequence of switches and controls. The mission was complete, but the implications would resonate far beyond the immediate tactical success. Dr. Rodriguez was waiting beside the aircraft as she climbed down from the cockpit, his expression reflecting the relief and satisfaction of someone who had watched months of preparation come to successful fruition. The mission had validated not only Rebecca's capabilities, but also the advanced technology and tactical concepts that had made the operation possible. "Outstanding performance," Rodriguez said, his voice carrying genuine admiration. The mission was executed with the kind of precision and professionalism that we expected from someone with your background. The target has been completely destroyed, and the threat has been eliminated. Rebecca nodded, though she was already thinking about the debriefing sessions that would follow. Every aspect of the mission would be analyzed and documented, providing lessons that could be applied to future operations. The success of Operation Nightfall would influence tactical doctrine and operational planning for years to come. The immediate medical examination confirmed that she had suffered no significant physiological stress from the mission, her body having adapted to the demands of high-performance aircraft operations over more than 2 decades of military flying. The psychological assessment would take longer, but Rebecca felt the quiet satisfaction that came from successfully completing a challenging mission under extreme conditions. As she walked away from the Wraith for the final time, Rebecca reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The institutional rejection she had experienced had seemed like the end of her career, but it had actually been the beginning of her most important contribution to military aviation. The mission she had just completed would never be publicly acknowledged, but it had proven that experience and skill were more valuable than any assumptions about gender or age. The men who had laughed at her qualifications were about to discover that they had been catastrophically wrong. Rebecca Martinez had proven that women could handle anything that combat aviation could demand, and she had done it at 30,000 feet in the most challenging mission of her career. The proof was in the destroyed facility, the successful penetration of impossible defenses, and the flawless execution of a mission that no one else could have completed. The laughter had stopped, replaced by respect for capabilities that transcended gender and challenged every assumption about what women could achieve in military aviation. The secure briefing room at the Pentagon buzzed with tension as Rebecca found herself facing a panel of senior military officers who just 6 months earlier had been content to push her into forced retirement. General Harrison sat at the head of the table, his expression notably different from their last encounter. The arrogance and dismissive attitude had been replaced by something Rebecca had rarely seen in his demeanor: genuine respect, mixed with uncomfortable recognition of his own prejudices. "Captain Martinez," Harrison began, then corrected himself with visible effort. "Colonel Martinez, your mission performance has been reviewed at the highest levels of the Defense Department. The successful elimination of the chemical weapons facility has been confirmed through multiple intelligence sources, and the strategic implications of your achievement cannot be overstated." Rebecca maintained her professional composure, though she felt a surge of satisfaction at the promotion that had accompanied her mission's success. The rank insignia on her uniform was still new, but it represented validation that transcended personal achievement. The institutional barriers that had limited her career progression had finally been removed, replaced by recognition of her actual capabilities. The mission also demonstrated the effectiveness of the Wraith program, continued General Patricia Stevens, the Air Force's first female Chief of Staff. "Your recommendations for operational deployment have been accepted, and you've been selected to command the new 19th Special Operations Squadron. The unit will be equipped with 12 modified aircraft and tasked with missions that conventional forces cannot handle." The appointment was everything Rebecca had dreamed of throughout her career: command of an elite unit equipped with the most advanced aircraft ever built, operating at the cutting edge of military technology and tactical innovation. More importantly, it represented a fundamental shift in how the military viewed the relationship between experience and effectiveness. The personnel selection for your squadron will be based on qualifications and performance rather than traditional demographic preferences, General Stevens added, her words carrying implications that resonated throughout the room. Your success has proven that our previous assumptions about optimal pilot characteristics were not only wrong but counterproductive to mission effectiveness. Rebecca understood the significance of that statement. The military bureaucracy was admitting that its gender-based assumptions had been flawed, that the institutional biases that had shaped personnel decisions for decades were being reconsidered, based on empirical evidence of combat effectiveness. The change would benefit not only female pilots, but all military personnel who had been limited by narrow definitions of suitability. What are the mission parameters for the new squadron? Rebecca asked, though she suspected the answer would involve operations similar to the chemical weapons facility strike. Classified at the highest levels, General Stevens replied. But I can tell you that the squadron will be tasked with operations that require the unique combination of advanced technology and exceptional pilot skill that you demonstrated during Operation Nightfall. The threats facing our nation are evolving, and our response capabilities must evolve as well. Rebecca nodded, understanding that her squadron would be dealing with the most challenging missions in the military's operational portfolio. The responsibility was enormous, but it also represented the kind of professional opportunity that had driven her throughout her career. The chance to lead the most elite pilots in the world, flying the most advanced aircraft ever built, on missions that could change the course of history. The meeting concluded with briefings on the administrative aspects of squadron activation, personnel selection procedures, and the classified facility where the unit would be based. Rebecca found herself thinking about the pilots she would recruit, the training program she would develop, and the missions that would test every skill she had acquired over more than 2 decades of military service. As she left the Pentagon, Rebecca reflected on the journey that had brought her from forced retirement to command of an elite special operations squadron. The institutional rejection that had seemed like the end of her career had actually been the catalyst for her most important contribution to military aviation. The prejudices that had limited her opportunities had ultimately been overcome by undeniable proof of her capabilities. The drive back to her temporary quarters took her through the Virginia countryside, where she had time to process the implications of her new assignment. The 19th Special Operations Squadron would be more than just another military unit. It would be a demonstration that performance transcended traditional assumptions about gender, age, and suitability for combat operations. Her phone buzzed with a message from Sarah Chun, who had been following the developments from her intelligence position. Congratulations on the promotion and the new command. I told you that retirement was the best thing that could happen to your career. Rebecca smiled at the message, remembering their conversation at the diner that had started this entire sequence of events. Sarah's intervention had provided the opportunity, but Rebecca's performance had created the results that were reshaping military aviation policy. The success of Operation Nightfall had proven that the most dangerous missions required the most experienced pilots, regardless of their demographic characteristics. The personnel files for potential squadron members were waiting in her quarters, representing the finest pilots in the Air Force, Navy, and Marines. Rebecca studied each profile carefully, looking for the combination of technical skills, combat experience, and psychological characteristics that would be required for the missions ahead. The selection process would be based purely on merit, establishing a new standard for elite military units. Among the files was Captain Jake Morrison, the young pilot who had been favored for the position Rebecca had ultimately filled. His record showed exceptional technical skills and the kind of adaptability that would be valuable for advanced aircraft operations. Rebecca made a note to consider him for the squadron, recognizing that talent should be rewarded. Regardless of previous institutional preferences, the training program for the new squadron would be based on the compressed timeline that had prepared Rebecca for Operation Nightfall, but adapted for the broader range of missions that the unit would be expected to handle. The curriculum would emphasize adaptability, tactical thinking, and the kind of precision flying that had enabled her to penetrate impossible defenses. 3 weeks later, Rebecca stood in the hangar at the classified facility that would serve as the squadron's home base, watching as the first group of selected pilots examined the Wraith aircraft that would be their primary operational equipment. The diversity of the group was notable, including pilots from different services, backgrounds, and demographic characteristics, all united by exceptional professional qualifications. The aircraft you're looking at represents the most advanced fighter technology in the world, Rebecca addressed the assembled pilots. But technology alone doesn't win battles. Success requires the kind of skill, experience, and judgment that can't be programmed into computers or automated systems. You've been selected because you possess those qualities. The training program that followed was intensive and demanding, pushing every pilot to the limits of their capabilities, while developing the specialized skills required for the squadron's missions. Rebecca found herself drawing on every aspect of her own experience, from her early combat deployments to the test pilot programs that had prepared her for experimental aircraft operations. The first operational mission came 6 months after squadron activation, a deep penetration reconnaissance operation that required the same kind of precision flying that had made Operation Nightfall successful. Rebecca led the formation of 4 Wraith aircraft through hostile airspace, demonstrating the tactical concepts that would define the squadron's operational doctrine. The mission was a complete success, with the aircraft penetrating defenses that conventional forces couldn't approach and gathering intelligence that would influence strategic planning for years to come. More importantly, it validated the selection criteria and training methods that Rebecca had developed, proving that the squadron could consistently execute missions that seemed impossible to outside observers. As the squadron's reputation grew within classified circles, Rebecca found herself briefing senior officials on the tactical innovations that had made such operations possible. The combination of advanced technology and exceptional pilot skill had created capabilities that were reshaping military planning and strategic thinking. The institutional changes that had begun with her own promotion were spreading throughout the military aviation community. Gender-based assumptions were being replaced by performance-based evaluations, and the barriers that had limited opportunities for female pilots were being systematically removed. The success of the 19th Special Operations Squadron was providing undeniable evidence that diversity of background and experience enhanced rather than hindered military effectiveness. 2 years after Operation Nightfall, Rebecca stood before a gathering of military aviation personnel at the Air Force Academy, delivering a lecture on tactical innovation and leadership that would influence the next generation of fighter pilots. The audience included young women who would have opportunities that had been denied to previous generations, their careers shaped by the precedents that Rebecca's success had established. The most important lesson I can share with you is that excellence has no demographic boundaries, Rebecca told the assembled cadets. The mission doesn't care about your gender, your age, or your background. It only cares about your ability to perform under pressure, to think clearly in crisis situations, and to execute with precision when failure is not an option. The speech was interrupted by applause from an audience that understood the significance of her words. Rebecca had proven that the assumptions about women in combat aviation were not only wrong but dangerous to national security. The institutional barriers that had limited her career had been overcome by undeniable proof of capability, creating opportunities for countless others who would follow in her path. As she concluded her presentation, Rebecca reflected on the journey that had brought her from forced retirement to command of an elite squadron that was redefining the boundaries of military aviation. The men who had laughed at her qualifications and questioned her ability to handle the pressures of combat flying had been proven catastrophically wrong by the most decisive evidence possible: successful completion of missions that no one else could accomplish. The transformation of military aviation policy was ongoing, with changes that would benefit not only female pilots, but all personnel who had been limited by narrow definitions of suitability. The success of Operation Nightfall had become a case study in the importance of merit-based selection and the dangers of institutional bias. Rebecca's story had become more than just personal vindication. It had become a catalyst for systemic change that would influence military aviation for generations to come. The woman who had been pushed toward retirement because of her gender had proven that she was exactly the kind of pilot the military needed most. And her success had opened doors that would never be closed again. If this incredible story of determination, skill, and triumph against impossible odds resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Which moment in Rebecca's journey inspired you most? Her defiance of institutional prejudice, her flawless execution of the impossible mission, or her ultimate vindication as a squadron commander? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss these powerful stories of underdogs who changed the world. Your engagement helps me bring you more incredible tales of courage, determination, and the triumph of human spirit over adversity. What kind of inspiring story would you like to hear next? Another military hero who defied the odds? A breakthrough innovator who changed everything? Or perhaps a story of someone who stood up for what was right when no one else would? Share your suggestions below.